Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to episode 1 of something that I hope to do weekly that I'm going to call Pop Shots. I'm James. You already know me from social. This is my effort. What Pop Shots is something that I want to do to be more interactive with y'all. Because I'm already in the DMs with you. I'm already doing everything I can to try to talk to y'all as much as possible. But I want to have a little more of a conversational thing. I'm going to try to get some guests on here. I know I've already been in talk with Real Talk coming on, obviously. I'm going to get breaking down the tape. Those guys, Hector and Zach, on. I want to get Sam on here. Eventually, some of the Boda boys will show up on here too, I am sure. But what this does is gives me a platform where I can talk about stuff a little bit more in depth than I would want to on the podcast, where we try to keep stuff to just kind of the headlines. So what we're talking about today is I'm going to talk about some Cam Newton thoughts I have, tying into that COVID in the NFL. And of course, because it's me, we're going to be talking about college football, which is another great thing about Pop Shots is creepy dolls play. That's horrifying. Just completely threw me off my train of thought. That was awesome. With college football, this will give me more of a platform to actually talk about some of these games. And week 1 was amazing. So I'm very excited to actually be discussing what happened, especially with last night in Georgia and Clemson. But before we even get into any of that, we actually already have a question. Go. You know what? I will open up the question right away. I am worried that it is a Q&A from Creepy Dolls Play. But let's see where this goes. Go right ahead whenever you're ready. I'm going to start leading and stuff. So week 1 in the week 1 in the NFL is next week, and I'm very excited about that. But week 1 in college football was here after a very exciting week 0. Northwestern. All right, and we're just going to ignore whatever questions going on there. But week 0 was awesome already. Week 1, we're leading in. Northwestern, Michigan State was a game I watched. Michigan, I watched play a little bit against Western Michigan. Auburn, I have some notes about that. Texas actually might be back. Georgia versus Clemson, like I already alluded to. UCLA upsetting LSU last night. And Coach O, and let's see what goes with that. Talk about fear. And Notre Dame and Florida State tonight. So let's start off with Northwestern and Michigan State, because Northwestern apparently lost way too much talent to the draft. And I mean, I thought it was really only Greg Newsome, but their running back for Michigan State, Kenny Walker, was able to get 23 carries for 264 yards, averaging 11.5, and even got 4 touchdowns. So Northwestern's run defense was non-existent the entire time. I don't know what's really going on with that. I mean, Kenny Walker wasn't even remotely on my radar before this season. It was nice to see. But Northwestern was a team that kept up in the Big Ten last year. And with a porous defense like this and a very strong run attack, I can't expect them to go against Master Teague and them against Ohio State and keep up in any way if they're going to play like this. Even at one point during this game, I saw a headline. It was when they show the graphics on ESPN, it said Michigan State's comparison, they had 364 yards compared to 76. My God. All right, we're gonna do this. We're gonna go into this. So Creepy Dolls Play asked me what's my biggest fear, and then wait, no worries. All right, Creepy Dolls Play, I'll play your damn game. My biggest fear. I did say chime in and ask me anything. I really should have been more specific about sports. I don't know. Public speaking's not great, but I don't know what you're going to go with that. So let's see where this goes, as I'm currently public speaking to live stream. So swipe away, move on from Michigan State because I'm already losing my train of thought there. Ronnie Bell of Michigan. Michigan looked very good, but they did look very good against a Western Michigan team that was very lackluster. Ronnie Bell had a roller coaster first half where he had one of the best catches that will be highlighted. One of the best catches I've seen that will be highlighted on Play of the Day later. Then he follows that up with a monster 76-yard touchdown, and then sadly follows that up with a potential season-ending injury as he went down off a punt return and grabbed his knee. That was just awful to see. I even wrote down in my notes that he was like a name to watch because I know he's a senior. Obviously, he'll be going into the draft. Hopefully, his injury is not season-ending. I don't think anybody ever roots for season-ending injuries. I'm sure there are people, but they're just assholes. Moving on from that, Desmond Ridder, some guy I talked about earlier in the year. A lot of college football fans already know him, but the Cincinnati quarterback looked very good playing Akron the other day. Once again, take him with a grain of salt because it was Akron, but they got a strong win. He went 20 for 25, 295 yards, 11.8 average on the passing with 4 touchdowns. So Desmond Ridder is looking like he's taking a little bit more of a safer approach, taking a little bit of that gamble out of his play that worried me about Justin Herbert a few years ago. And honestly, I think we could be talking about Desmond Ridder rising up a lot of rankings very soon. So I'm interested to see what actually ends up happening here with Desmond Ridder. I do think they'll make another big run. I don't think Cincinnati's a joke of a team in any sense. But speaking of jokes of a team, speaking of teams that I thought I wasn't even keeping on my radar, I think Bo Nix and Brian Harsin regime is here because Bo Nix looked really freaking good last night. I forget who they were playing. I know it was some lower end team. So once again, this is the whole thing about college football. Take it with a grain of salt. Wait for the Iron Bowl. Wait for whomsoever Auburn plays next. But Bo Nix, similar stat line, 20 for 22, 275 yards, 12.5 average, and 3 touchdowns. He looked good. Bo Nix looked comfortable, and that's something we didn't see from Bo Nix last year. We saw Bo Nix that was very worried, very concerned, not very concerned, very worried in the pocket, didn't look confident after that year one that we saw where it was like, oh man, this could be the dude that Auburn's been looking for, especially a guy named Bo matching up with the Bo Jackson name, right? Like that's what you want from Auburn is a Bo connection. So Gus Malzahn moves on. Brian Harsin comes in. I think his scheme really works for him. We'll see what ends up happening through the end of the year because I know Auburn doesn't necessarily have an easy walk like most teams do. What is your worst nightmare? I think you meant talking about the fighting show. I don't know what's going on. So, Bo Nix back, whatever. Speaking of being back, Texas scares the shit out of me. And I don't want them to be back. The reason I got into college football was the Reggie Bush era. Watching Vince Young smack them in the Rose Bowl was a heartbreaking loss for me as a young fan. But Steve Sarkisian looks like he's turning this team around. Offensively, they looked unstoppable. And against the ULL team, Lafayette, that was very freaking good last year. I mean, they were good enough to get ranked, I think, 22nd this year. Bijan Robinson, who went down a little bit, had me nervous because he was seemingly just controlling the game. He had 20 carries for 103 yards and a touchdown. But an 18-38 loss, Texas might be really good again. This might be the team that we're all all right, cool. Oklahoma's going to the SEC. That's awesome. But Texas coming over seems like more of a money grab. I think Texas might, start climbing back up. On that note, though, on the note of teams that were once good, now collapsing, being back, I don't think Miami is back. And that might be me just taking that with looking at Alabama and being oh man, this Alabama team is real. I previously did not see any tape on Young, the Alabama quarterback, but oh my God, everything they were able to do was unfucking believable. They seem to be running hurry up. Back to the questions. Yes, I like sports. My favorite food is just any type of pasta because, fucking stereotypical. And my favorite actor, I like Jason Sudeikis a lot, yet I haven't watched, what's it called? I can't even think of it. So, my God, I am not good at multitasking. We're learning this live on episode 1 of Pop Shots. So Young looked really good. The system looked like it really fit what Alabama needed to do. And honestly, Bryce Young looks like he could be the best quarterback, and this might be an overreaction, but the best quarterback to come out of this Alabama system in a long time. That's including Jalen Hurts. That's including Mac Jones, who we're going to get to a little bit later. And that's including Tua Tagovailoa. Favorite, all right, back on this. Favorite TV show, we are going to go, I've always, not even a question, Always Sunny. I rewatched that repeatedly. It's actually disturbing how much I've watched that, as I'm saying that to creepy dolls play. So, Bijan Robinson oh my God, we're not even on Bijan Robinson. Guys, I have such bad ADHD, and this is falling apart. Derek King did not look good in this matchup. The Miami defense looked porous. They pulled out the new turnover chain when they were already down. Like, it was embarrassing for a Miami fan. I'm not a Miami fan, but this is a game that Miami fans went into, and you should go into every game thinking you're going to win. But Miami fans went into thinking, hey, like, we stand a chance. Like, this is our week one. They've been hyping themselves up for this. And Nick Saban, Alabama, Bryce Young came in and stomped them. They changed up pace. They did everything that showed why Nick Saban is the greatest college football coach of all time. And here we are with a 44-13 loss. Alabama scares the shit out of me. You want to know my greatest fear? Legitimately, go back to this one. It's facing Alabama right now as a Gamecock fan, because I don't think we're on their schedule. I think that's a split. They should be in the West, but scares the shit out of me that at some point there might be an Alabama lineup in the next couple years. Bo Nix is back. Texas scared me. So keeping it in the SEC, keeping it with who's going to win in that game? Talking about the one you're saying. I don't even know what we're doing. Okay. Georgia, Clemson. Clemson did not look good. Clemson looked bad. And I don't know if that was necessarily the offense stuttering because they didn't have any, any proper time together, whatever. I don't know if this was just a strong week one matchup, which it was. It was for sure a defensive battle, but Georgia's defense, who we've been focusing on so much with all these transfers and all this stuff, Georgia's defense looked good. And most of the time they had Clemson pinned back. I can't count the amount of drives where Clemson was sitting in their own end zone and had to start a drive that would have been almost 90 plus yards. So they kept DJ uncomfortable the entire time. The young quarterback did not look like he could even get a rhythm going. He only managed 180 total yards of offense, which says great things. I mean, and this is a guy who, from my perspective, I was big on JT Daniels. JT Daniels didn't look necessarily insanely good either last night. It was the defense that won the game, and I'm almost certain it was a pick six that got them that touchdown. The offense was not good. It just wasn't there. And I'm sure that'll pick up, but if Georgia can rely on this defense and if Georgia can keep this like special teams defensive blend, it's going to be hard to match up with them no matter what. And then at some point, you got to assume JT Daniels is going to step up and he's going to be better, but we just don't know. Actually, oh my God, shout out Creepy Dolls, and thank you for agreeing, and very interesting, thank you. Sorry, I ignored you earlier. I'm just not really sure what's going on. I am confused. So, final thoughts about that game. With all this talk about Lynn J. Dixon, all this talk about DJ Unga, we're going to leave that one blank because I'm definitely going to butcher his name. I'm going to figure out by the end of the season how to say DJ's last name properly. Georgia's defense held them strong. And, I mean, back to the Lynn J. Dixon, they held him to 1 yard rushing just in like the first half. He finished with less than, I think, 20 yards. I could be wrong about that one. That's just off the top of the head. Clemson should be worried. And they have a very soft schedule looking forward. I know they have like South Carolina State next. They have Boston College. They have a bunch of ACC teams, and I should be more excited about Boston College, especially after last year, them almost upsetting. I'm not as confident. I apologize, Creepy. That one's on me. That one's on me. I'm a very rude human being. It's just the Bostonian in me. I genuinely thought Creepy Dolls was here to like try to feed me and throw me off, which you're doing a good job of, but that just might be my own ADHD. So moving on from that, let's talk staying in the SEC still. UCLA steps in, and I thought this could have upset written all over it. I didn't think it was going to be as evident as it was, but UCLA ends up beating LSU. Dorian Thompson-Robinson still playing phenomenal football. They do seem to still be focused on the run, which is kind of working for them. Very Chip Kelly offense. He's been just, run the ball, run the ball, run the ball. Zach Charbonnet continuing that with 11 carries, 117 yards. He averaged about like 10.6 and got a touchdown. But they did that and then would just hit LSU for a big chunk play over the top. And it works. And that's scary for anyone in the Pac-12, for anyone looking at the college playoff ahead. UCLA might be a dark horse to sneak in like at least the Pac-12 championship. They should be. I mean, I know people are writing them off already saying whatever, especially after week 0. Chip Kelly's for sure back. Coach Ed Orgeron, I'm not confident he's going to finish this year with LSU, especially after last year. The year before that, you can kind of look at it and be like, oh, Joe Burrow was the guy. Jamar Chase was the guy. But how much credit do you really give to Ed Orgeron? I mean, I know he was a big part of Joe Burrow coming there, but with 2 straight seasons of am I screwed? You know what? I'll give that. As a tall person, we're gonna go into fears again. I'm not crazy about heights. I'm not one of those people who is like, oh my god, like if I'm on a skyscraper, it does give you that little like chest anxiety. But yeah, I'll let you keep shooting questions because I told you to shut up. But yes, heights weird me out a little bit. I'm not gonna say I'm afraid of heights. Chip Kelly's back. Ed Orgeron should be very concerned about his job. I saw there was some source that was saying he's going to be fired either today or Monday. I doubt that, especially against a UCLA team. I think they have a case. I do think he should realize, and I know he's kind of dumb, but he should realize that his job is on the hot seat. I don't know what happened with Devin Stingley last night, but none of them looked good. This LSU defense, DBU, looked bad. So, moving forward, we're talking about Notre Dame and Florida State, which is tonight. Notre Dame's a heavy odds-on favorite. Jack Cohen will be leading them and filling in the huge shoes that Ian Book left. Florida State, we don't know who is going to be under center. More likely than not, I would say Jordan Travis, just because he has experience in the system. I want Mackenzie Milton to be the starter. Probably won't be, especially against a very strong Notre Dame team. And it's easy to look at them and say, like, Ian Book was the guy who did all this work. More likely than not, they still have, not more likely than not, they do still have a lot of the talent from last year. They're going to be fine. This is a new team. This is a new Notre Dame. Jack Cohen is a very good quarterback, despite what we saw 2 years prior. Notre Dame should win this game strongly. They are a very good team. And Florida State is also a rising team. But with all these transfers, it's going to take some time to gel. So if I'm a Notre Dame fan, I'm very confident going into this game. It's still going to be a fun game. I hope that for my sake as a fan, not a fan of Notre Dame, just a fan of college football, that it's going to be a fun game. But we'll see. I don't have a lot of confidence in this Florida State front. If Mackenzie Milton plays, I do think it's a different game just because I love Mackenzie Milton. But right now, it's looking like Jordan Travis. It's looking like a gel game. I still have a lot of faith in Norvell. Fans should still have a lot of faith in Norvell, but this is a loss. I'm willing to write that off right now. And we'll see how well this aged later. So, since I'm from the Boston area, I'm not necessarily a Patriots fan. I do support my friends who are Patriots fans. Obviously, it was the first team I rooted for. Oh, God. Are you a YouTuber or streamer? I guess I stream. Yes. And hey, no more shut-ups. I'm dying laughing. You're my favorite comedian. Thank you. It's going to be a fun game, but we'll see. There's a lot of stuff you should save later and come back in either like DM or message or whatever. I'll be doing this next week. Yeah, come back and chirp me because I'll own up to my bad takes. There's a lot to see here. Especially what did I already say so far? Desmond Ridder might be a dark horse Heisman. JT Daniels doesn't look great, and Notre Dame is going to win. So let's see how those 3 takes age as of right now. Now I got the pressure on. So with supporting my friends who are Patriots fans, and with obviously the biggest storyline right now being this Cam Newton news, right? Or from the past week being the Cam Newton news, we kind of got to dive into what this looks like. And in the modern NFL, in what the NFL, and I'm not talking about like within the past 10 years, I'm talking about within the past 2 years with the COVID NFL, the unfortunate consequence of where we are is teams in the NFL are making it impossible, near impossible, if you're not in the upper echelon, if you're not like a DeAndre Hopkins who has openly said, like, I'm not going to get the vaccine, don't trust it, making it impossible to be on a roster. And I'm going to leave politics out of this. I'm not going to talk about like pro or against vaccines, but they have made it clear it is not like a we're going to play, it's a forfeited loss. If you do not have enough players, if you cannot field a team, you are writing off a loss. So if you're looking at this, if you're Bill Belichick and you're sitting there and you're looking at Cam Newton, who is openly against the vaccine, had this whole issue, whatever, are you going to allow a backup quarterback to be on your roster if they could potentially sacrifice a game on a team that's in a very weird area with a young quarterback? Wow, that's really bad. They don't look great, and I know what COVID is / COVID-19 means that you got to take a vaccine on these. Yeah, and on that note, I mean, it's America. You're allowed to do what you want. That's the great thing about where we live. But you are an athlete. You sign a contract, and with that, you have to follow these teams' rules. So the team can release you from this at any point. And it is still your right as an American to do what you want. And that's a whole nother conversation. That's a whole nother push away. We're going to leave that be where it is, because there's a whole thing versus like your right as an American versus your right as like a player, whatever. I can understand the perspective of letting Cam go. Now with that, I want to tie into like tinfoil hat James on what Cam Newton actually was to the Patriots. Last year, I guess I'll preface it with this. And I look at this Patriots team, and last year you saw a bunch of players who no one could fucking name. It was Julian Edelman. That was it. Julian Edelman was like the only wide receiver you could name, and that was it. They weren't a team that was going to compete last year. So you bring in a guy like Cam Newton to have a face of a franchise, right? Or at least a notable face for a franchise. He's not going to be the Tom Brady, obviously. Cam Newton was a shield. Cam Newton was a smokescreen. Cam Newton was a wall that covered up, because Patriot fans could not accept this, that they were in a rebuild. That they were in not a tank, but they were in a rebuild on the fly, which is one of the hardest things to do in the NFL. I'm personally a Browns fan. We lived in a true rebuild for, I don't know, a decade plus. Tinfoil hat. You should get one of those to be a Tin Man for Halloween. I might do that. Know what? I'll do a whole Halloween episode, and I'll put on a tinfoil hat, and we'll just throw wild conspiracies about the NFL. So I think, personally, looking at it, Cam Newton was never a long-term solution for this team. And that, I mean, that's very obvious to say, especially if they're going to draft someone like Mac Jones. But what the Patriots did so well is they were able to rebuild on the fly. They looked at last year. They said, we're not going to win. It's a COVID year. We're moving on from what is one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. Let's get this guy in here who we can at least show is like, hey, we're trying, but are you? They put themselves in a position to get a quarterback. Once again, Mac Jones. And then they looked at this free agent class. They looked at who was available this next year, all the money they had, the lack of money that other teams had, and they built on that. They signed all these free agents. They did all this work to get this huge defense in, which is Bill Belichick's bread and butter. And now they can walk on away from Cam Newton. What do you mean they're not going to win? That doesn't even make sense. I meant last year they had to look at it in a perspective of like, we're moving on. We're in a very weird phase. that they weren't going to win the Super Bowl, especially without like a top tier quarterback, without, with all these opt outs, with all that. They knew what was going on. I don't think the Patriots looked at last year saying, yes, we are going to win the Super Bowl, which should be the mindset all the time. But they had to have looked at it and be like, we're going to sneaky rebuild. We're looking at 2020. Or 2021. We're looking at the free agent class. We're moving forward. They get this kid, Mac Jones, in. Right, who I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of in the world. He is growing on me, which I hate for myself because I've been so anti-Mac Jones through the entire draft process, through, training camp, whatever. He's doing everything right now. He's doing everything the Patriots want him to do. So Mac Jones is the final piece to this sneaky rebuild. And I hate that I'm saying this right now, but Mac Jones is the sneaky final piece to complete this rebuild to bring the team forward. Right now, the Patriots look like a playoff contending team. Mac Jones makes all the right passes. He is staying later. He is getting in there early. He is apparently teaching Cam Newton the freaking playbook. That's news to me. That was something that came out yesterday from Rob Ninkovich, former Patriot. He also, prospectively, is kind of the closest thing we've seen to Tom Brady. Right, without being a 6th round pick, because that's like the biggest, like, okay, like a mobile quarterback, great pocket passer, whatever, like paint that broad brushstroke. But then you talk about Tom Brady, who was a 6th round pick, 199, buried through all these other people and whatever. Hey, thank you, appreciate that. Even after I've told you to shut up so many times. So with that, right, we look at the Mac Jones story. He went to Alabama. He's obviously good enough to at least make the roster, but he was buried behind a Jalen Hurts. He was buried behind a Tua Tagovailoa. Worked his way up from being like a practice squad guy, being like a C-team guy, to being the starting quarterback, getting as close as you possibly can to winning the Natty, and being a true like workhorse, being a grinding quarterback, being a play from behind guy, which is really weird to say, which is a really odd thing to say for a guy who went to Alabama, but he's a guy who fought his way through and proved that he belongs in the NFL. So I think Mac Jones was kind of the final answer to this sneaky rebuild. I think Mac Jones is going to be good in the NFL. I still have a lot I want to see from him. And like I said, this is painful for me to say because I've been such an anti-Mac Jones guy. But for the Patriots, he has worked his ass off. He has grinded. He's been reading the playbook. He's been learning. He's been doing reps. He's been being a true leader. If they can make a couple more pieces fall into place, there's no reason that they aren't a deep playoff run contender in the next couple of years. And which one I hate for myself as a Browns fan in New England, but 2, I love for my friends. Do you think he's good in NFL? Because I have no clue who Mac Jones is. Okay. He was very good in college, but I think with that you could have taken it in perspective of like he had how many first round picks around him. I think Mac Jones has the mental abilities. I think Mac Jones has the mental pieces. I think Mac Jones has he checks all the right boxes for him to be an elite quarterback mentally. Play-wise, I still have a lot I want to see. I still think he plays it a little safe. I think Josh McDaniels and Bill Belichick are writing a system that really plays for him. But once again, that's a wait-and-see type of situation. But with that, I think I just unplugged my mic. I did not. With that, that is the show. That is episode 1 of Pop Shots. Thank you to Creepy Dolls Play for showing up, for hanging out, for chatting for a bit. You know where to find us everywhere at Boda Sports, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Twitch, James from Boda, YouTube, Boda Sports. You can find our podcast everywhere by searching Boda Sports. We put them all under one little thing for you. Other than that, thank you all so much for the support. I love every single one of you for even, showing up and commenting and doing whatever we do. Creepy Dolls Play. All right. Side note, I'm not even going to lie. I really thought you were going to come in here and just totally throw me off my game. And you turned out to be a really great person. So you know what? Shout out you, Creepy Dolls Play. You get the MVP for this episode. Let's see if I can make that happen. You guys want to see an MVP each episode of Pop Shots? Because we can make that work. But thank you all so much for joining me for episode 1. Stay tuned on social for when I announce episode 2. I love y'all. Stay beautiful.